Coming up on this Monday edition of Daybreak, Korea's National Assembly remains in deadlock after the ruling party rejects the main opposition party's proposal for the creation of a trilateral dialogue channel with the bereaved families on April's ferry sinking. An American journalist held captive for 2 years by an al-Qaeda-linked group in Syria has been released just days after another US reporter was beheaded in Iraq. Plus, a powerful 6.0 magnitude earthquake rocks California's northern Bay Area, injuring dozens, 3 seriously. Daybreak begins now. Hello and thanks for joining us. To our viewers around the world at 6 a.m. on Monday, August 25th here in Seoul. I'm Mark Broom and you are tuned in to Daybreak. We start this morning at Korea's National Assembly. The ruling party has rejected a proposal by the opposition party to negotiate a long-stalled bill on April's Sewol-ho ferry disaster with the victims' families. The ruling Saenuri Party's floor spokesperson expressed concerns on Sunday that the opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy may be attempting to break a previous agreement between the two parties. He added that passing a bill through the tripartite negotiations would be a violation of representative democracy. Earlier, the opposition had not only proposed the three-way talks, but also pressured President Park Geun-hye to listen to the families who have been camping out near the presidential office demanding to meet with the president. Political wrangling over the details of this bill have stalled the passage of major bills and put the brakes on the president's running of state affairs. Korea's Ministry of National Defense will meet later on this Monday to discuss ways to reform the military after a slew of violent incidents at frontline barracks, including the recent bullying death of a young army conscript. A government official says a military culture reformation committee will talk about ways to change the military judicial system, as well as the possible establishment of a military ombudsman at the National Assembly. Now, this committee consists of 130 military experts, including Defense Minister Han Min-gu. The death of the army private who was beaten to death in April, as well as the case of a soldier who required extra attention that shot himself dead during a live-fire exercise, has sparked a debate about harassment and the general culture in Korea's military. Now, US President Barack Obama is planning to shake up his team in charge of North Korea policy. According to sources in Washington on Sunday, the president is expected to name Sidney Seller, the director for Korea at the National Security Council, as the new US special envoy to the six-party denuclearization talks. The outgoing US ambassador to South Korea, Sung Kim, will most likely replace Glyn Davies as the special representative of the Secretary of State for North Korea policy. Despite the new faces, watchers say the Obama administration's North Korea policy will remain the same. Now, North Korea is continuing to lash out against the ongoing joint military exercises between South Korea and the US, dubbed the Ulchi Freedom Guardian. But the regime, in fact, has held back from test firing any missiles for well over a week now. Watchers say North Korea is keen to avoid upsetting Seoul ahead of the upcoming Asian Games, which will be held in the South Korean city of Incheon from the middle of next month. Our Son Jung-in has his report.
2 days before Seoul and Washington kicked off their annual 2-week Ulchi Freedom Guardian exercise, the North Korean military began making threats.
If we decide South Korea's small and big military bases will turn into a sea of fire and a heap of ashes.
Pyongyang has long denounced the drills as a rehearsal for an invasion of the North. But since it fired 5 short-range rockets into the East Sea on August 14th, the North has shown some restraint. Instead, it has proposed talks to discuss logistics for its athletes and cheering squad at the upcoming Incheon Asian Games.
The North Korea proposed talks on the practical issues related to the Asian Games through an exchange of letters.
Experts view the North's latest contradictory moves of threats and offers of dialogue as a typical stick-and-carrot strategy.
As opposed to their threatening remarks in written words, I think the North will propose more dialogue in the future to send its delegation to the Asian Games.
Many experts believe inter-Korean talks will resume after the joint drills are over, but most agree it will be difficult to attain many tangible results on issues such as holding family reunions and resuming tours to North Korea's Mount Kumgang Resort. 손정인, 아리랑뉴스.
Now, the two Koreas are set to begin exchanging opinions on a variety of issues related to North Korea's participation in the upcoming Asian Games in Incheon. A South Korean government official said on Sunday that communications between the two sides will likely start at the beginning of the week. One subject of discussion could involve the question of whether the South should completely shoulder the cost of the North's participation, as Pyongyang has requested. The North Korean government notified Seoul last Friday that it would dispatch a 273-member delegation that includes 150 athletes to the Games. The two sides have agreed to discuss the details of the North's participation, as we heard in that report just then, through an exchange of letters. This year's Asian Games kick off in Incheon on September 19th. Now, a map produced by the Japanese government that recognizes Korea's ownership of its easternmost islets of Dokdo has been unveiled in a clear piece of evidence refuting Japan's continual claims to the territory. Our Chae-yu-sun has this report.
For the 10th consecutive year, the Japanese government has claimed ownership of the Korea-controlled Dokdo Island in the East Sea. The latest claim appeared in a defense white paper released earlier this month. But now, a recently released map shows that Japan considered Dokdo to be Korean territory right after its surrender in World War II. Korea's state-run Northeast Asian History Foundation revealed a scanned file of the map, which was discovered by researcher Jung Tae-man. The map, drawn up by Japan before it signed a peace treaty with Allied forces in September of 1951, clearly excludes Dokdo from Japanese territory. Instead, it has a semicircle surrounding the islets, indicating they belong to Korea. Korea argues it regained sovereignty over Dokdo along with the rest of the Korean peninsula after its post-war independence from Japan's colonial rule. For years, conservative groups in Japan have claimed Dokdo was labeled their territory on the map, which was submitted to the Japanese parliament before it ratified the peace treaty. Japanese researchers, however, never publicized it. The map appears to offer evidence that both the Japanese government and parliament once recognized the islets as Korean territory. What's also interesting is how Chung found the map. He said a conservative Japanese person had posted the map obtained from Japan's National Diet Library on his website to prove that Dokdo was Japanese territory. But he perhaps failed to catch the semicircle because the islets' names were written over it. Chae-yu-sun, 아리랑뉴스.
Time now for a look through the international headlines we're following on this Monday morning. For that, we turn to our Eunice Kim, standing by at the News Centre. Good morning, Eunice.
Good morning to you, Mark. A kidnapped American journalist has been released by his hostages in Syria. Peter Theo Curtis, since going missing in 2012, was held captive by the Jabhat al-Nusra terrorist group, an al-Qaeda affiliate in Syria who has been fighting the government of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. Now, reports say Curtis was released to UN personnel in the Golan Heights, where he was met by U.S. government officials and moved out of Syria. Further circumstances of his release is not yet known. His family, who have ties to Massachusetts, said they were deeply relieved and grateful for his return, while thinking constantly of the other hostages who are still being held. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry, who confirmed the release in a statement, said the U.S. was using every diplomatic, intelligence, and military tool at its disposal to secure the release of other Americans being held hostage in Syria. Meanwhile, UK officials say they are close to identifying the jihadist who beheaded U.S. journalist James Foley, who appeared to have a British accent. British ambassador to the U.S. Peter Westmacott told CNN that a great deal was being put into the search, including sophisticated American voice recognition technology to analyze the man's voice. Reports say the Islamic State militant is believed to be from London, who calls himself John. The diplomat also warned that he is just one of an estimated 500 Britons who have traveled to Syria and Iraq to take part in jihad. A magnitude 6.0 earthquake has rattled Northern California, damaging historic buildings and injuring more than 100 people in the state's wine country. The U.S. Geological Survey says the quake hit around 3:20 Sunday morning local time, with an epicenter just less than 10 kilometers south-southwest of Napa. The strongest earthquake the region had seen in a quarter century triggered a state of emergency by California Governor Jerry Brown. Dozens of aftershocks were also recorded. Officials at a Napa hospital said it treated at least 120 injured people. Among those critically hurt was a young child when a fireplace had crumbled near him. He was airlifted to UC Davis Medical Center. And the first British national to contract Ebola in nearly 40 years will be flown back to the UK for treatment. The man, who lived in Sierra Leone and is thought to be an aid worker, is set to travel on a specially equipped Royal Air Force plane to North London, where a dedicated isolation unit at the Royal Free Hospital is being prepared for his arrival. Meanwhile, a health worker associated with the World Health Organization has fallen ill from Ebola in Sierra Leone and is receiving care. This as authorities in the Democratic Republic of Congo have said 2 people there have died from Ebola in the country's northwest.
We start before the sun rises to bring you the latest stories out of Korea. We also lead the way with important global coverage. Stay on the pulse of what is happening with Daybreak.
Now, Korea's economic policymakers are becoming increasingly concerned about the country's slowing economic growth. It's this prolonged trend that has many worried Korea could experience the same kind of long-term economic stagnation that Japan experienced during its 2 so-called lost decades. Our Shin Se-min reports.
Korea's consumer price growth stayed below 2% for the 21th consecutive month in July, for the first time since the government started collecting consumer price data in 1965. According to data released by Statistics Korea on Sunday, Korea's consumer price growth was at 1.1% in the last quarter of 2013 and the first quarter of this year, and it was at 1.6% in the second quarter, well below the central bank's target band. Experts say the inflation rate should stay within the 2 to 3% range in order to ensure economic growth and maintain consumer price stability. This has raised concerns that Korea may be in for a long period of economic stagnation, similar to Japan's 2 lost decades that began in the early 90s. However, Japan's recent efforts to change its situation seem to be paying off, and its consumer price growth surpassed Korea's for the first time in 40 years since 1974 in the second quarter, with a rate of 3.6%. The situation over in Korea has prompted the government to revise down its estimate for this year's inflation rate to 1.8% from 2.3% earlier this year. But the government is taking steps to address the problem. Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan's new economic team unveiled a $39 billion stimulus package last month aimed at boosting the economy and lifting the slumping housing market. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Now, shifting gears to a more cultural story, the Korean period blockbuster Roaring Currents continues to up the local box office ante. It's the most watched movie in Korean film history, smashing through the 16 million viewer mark on Sunday and could go even higher. And as Kwon So-ah reports, part of the movie's success can be attributed to its very nice visual effects.
The intense naval combat scene depicting the historic Battle of Myeongyang with hundreds of vessels was in reality made using just 4 ships during filming. The backdrop of 330 Japanese ships charging vigorously along with hundreds of soldiers were brought to life with sophisticated 3D computer graphics. Even the sea waves are fake. The battle scene takes up half of the movie, and visual effects were used in over 90% of the filmmaking process.
We had over 60 minutes of a battle scene to depict, with more than 300 vessels, so it is no exaggeration to say that almost all the scenes were made using special effects.
The swirling torrents crashing against the ships and other water movements in particular were hard to create, and they had to make use of what was available. For the speed of the water or direction of the wind, things that were impossible to digitalize, they worked from experience.
With the high level of visual effects being stressed in making movies, we had a long, extensive discussion about solving the technical obstacles. I think we ended up with a satisfactory result.
Korean digital technology is slowly gaining recognition in the cinema industry after years of research and development. It's now being regarded as one of the main reasons for the wild success of the movie Roaring Currents. Kwon So-ah, 아리랑뉴스.
Well, it's time for Industry Insight this week, and Korea is one of the most wired and innovative nations in the world, but a number of cultural factors can make it rather difficult for young and up-and-coming entrepreneurs. Our Connie Kim takes a look at some of the challenges facing Korea's tech startups.
Facebook, Yahoo, Apple. These are just a few big names that started out small in Silicon Valley. Their big ideas eventually reached consumers, but only after the right financial backers came along. Here in Korea, things can be a bit tougher for startups. 1,500 Silicon Valley venture companies raised $25 billion last year. The total for Korea-based startups, a mere 6/100ths of that. Korea saw explosive growth in venture-backed capital starting in the 90s, but only about a little more than half currently survive past the 5-year mark today. Well, to get a better sense of where things stand today, I talked with one startup, Shaker Media, a video creating company that is thriving. Take a look. Making memories last is what Shaker Media does. With its instant video creating platform, Shaker makes dragging and dropping simple and creating professional quality videos easier.
I think of video as the most powerful storytelling medium. When you and I are here face-to-face talking, that's a powerful storytelling medium. And so I thought that it would be necessary and desirable for many people, everyone, not just the people with the big production budgets and the fancy expensive cameras, to be able to do video, but for everyone to do great video.
It also helps small businesses advertise, in a way helping the Park Geun-hye administration's creative economy drive in search for fresh, innovative ideas for growth engines.
Video ads have 3 times the click-through rate of mobile advertisements. They are effective, but small businesses just couldn't participate because they couldn't afford to spend $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 on producing a beautiful video advertisement.
Born 3 years ago, Shaker now serves customers all throughout Asia and the Americas, having raised about $3 million as of May this year. So I know it's quite tough for Korean venture companies to get investment. Where did you get the investment from?
There is a lot of venture capital available here in Korea today. Angel investors are very active. We've also raised money from Facebook executives, We've also raised money from Korea's largest internet company, NHN Investment, and Korea's largest steel company, POSCO Investment.
But that's not the reality for the majority of startups in Korea. Having to break ground on the back of financial guarantees or loans can turn off a lot of young entrepreneurs, especially in a business environment where investing through M&As is not as prevalent as it is in, say, the United States. But Lee says Korea is the market to try out new things as long as young entrepreneurs utilize a strong IT infrastructure and low entry barrier for startups in the country.
There is a vibrant local market here in Korea, an incredible test bed to test your ideas with a very receptive local market that's ready to try new things.
Connie Kim, Arirang News.
And a good Monday morning to you all as we kick things off with the 2014 Little League World Series, as Korea has been shocking the world as they beat Japan for the second straight time over the weekend 12-3 and advanced to the championship game. And earlier today, they faced off against Jackie Robinson West for that title. And of course, Korea does strike early against the U.S. champions as they scored once in the first inning and in the third inning as well, taking an early 2-0 lead. A nail-biter of a game all throughout as both teams play with full emotions, but Shin Dong-hwan in the fifth inning adds a solo shot, adding Korea's lead to 4-1. Now, Korea does score 4 runs in the sixth inning, and currently at the bottom of the sixth inning, the score is 8-4 Korea. And now shifting gears to volleyball, where the South Korean men's national volleyball team faced off against India during the AVC Cup Finals and won their very first title. With the biennial tournament taking place at Almaty, Kazakhstan, the South Korean men's team goes undefeated, winning all 6 of their matches, including the final against India. Now facing off against India for the second time, the result wasn't any different as they win this one in straight sets 3-0, winning their first AVC Cup title. And speaking of first, with the Summer Youth Olympics currently taking place in Nanjing, China, Kim Kyung-tae won Korea's first ever track medal when he finished third during the 110-meter hurdles, coming in at a final time of 13.43 seconds for the bronze medal. And now with that, we're going to move over to Sunday's K-League Classic action. We had the Incheon United draw against Jeju United 0-0, with Cheonnam beating Busan in a close one 1-0. Meanwhile, let's take a look at the Suwon Samsung Blue Wings take on Seongnam FC. Now going into the match here, both sides going neck and neck in the first half of the match as they're evenly matched despite the scoreless first half. But the second half, a different story as Kim Tae-hwan scores in the 56th minute, giving Seongnam FC the 1-0 lead. But shortly after the 62nd minute of the match, it's Suwon Santos to the rescue, the equalizer, as the match is now tied 1-1. Suwon tries to get in one last goal in the 90th minute, but to no avail as the match ends in a 1-1 draw. And now finishing things off with some Sunday night KBO action, we had the Hanwha Eagles and the Kia Tigers rain out last night, but the LG Twins rallied back to beat the Lotte Giants 6-5, with the SK Wyverns beating the Samsung Lions 11-8. Meanwhile, let's take a look at the NC Dinos square off against the Tucson Bears. And of course, going into the game here, we go over to the first inning of the game. Eric Thames sack fly to left field. Park Min-woo scores from third and it's 1-0 NC. Bottom of the inning, Kim Hyun-soo, that's a double to center. In comes Choi Joo-hwan and he's safe 1-1. Meanwhile, both starting pitchers, Eric Hacker and Yuneski Maya, throwing a brilliant game as this game goes into the 9th inning with a man on third, and that's a wild pitch from Lee Yong-chan. Ji Seok-kun scores, and that's the difference as the NC Dinos win it 2-1. And just finishing things off just in right now, Canadian Women's Open. We had Ryu So-yeon, who was able to win the title with Chen Na-yeon and Park Eun-bi finishing second and third place there. We'll have more updates on that later on the program. With that said, it's going to do it for me. This has been SJ. Have a great rest of the day and see you guys again for your sports needs.
Well, rain clouds have moved into the peninsula again, and it seems like the rain is pounding in some of these areas. So heavy rain advisory and warning has been issued to those regions, whereas the central parts of the peninsula will just see sporadic showers in the morning hours. So with another band of rain expected throughout the day, skies will stay overcast and temperatures will be much cooler compared to yesterday. I mean, over the weekend was just too hot. But for today, temperatures will hardly make it to upper 20s, as we can see. And the daytime high in the capital and Gwangju will make it to 26, while Daegu and Busan will climb to 27 and 25 respectively. And for other regions, it looks like Jeju Island will get up to 30, Daejeon will top out at 27, and Dokdo should see highs of 22 this afternoon. While the rain is forecast to go away from the upper areas in the afternoon, then the other regions will also see rain gradually letting up as the day goes on. Well, that's all for now. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much, Jion, for the weather there. Those are the stories we have for you at this hour. Good luck to Korea in the Little League World Championships. And we'll be back throughout the day with many more news updates. I'll be back at 10 a.m. Korea time. Until then, goodbye.